Hey guys, Simply Betta here. So in the last video I made, I kind of prompted, it was like a little game or a little discussion. I showed some images of some fish that came out of a spawn of mine, and I asked you guys, okay, how would you pair these fish to then create the next generation, the best offspring? Like, what do you think are the best fish out of all these fish to move forward with? And I got so many comments, I couldn't even reply to all of them. You guys obviously had a lot of fun. I'll mention what the top picks were at the end of this video. So now it's time for me to explain the fish I chose and why, and the thought process that I kind of use when looking at a bunch of fish and then deciding what are the best ones. I'll give a quick recap. The male and the female that I started with were both imports that I had had for a while. The male was a black dragon half moon plakat. This image, it isn't of him. I don't have a picture of him, or I forgot to take one, I guess. So this is just a fish that I pulled off the internet that looks like him, kind of. And then the female is just a solid black half moon plakat female, really nice form, looks kind of like this fish. Again, not my fish, not the picture of the fish, but that just looks a lot like her. So quite a while ago, I spawned these two fish, I raised the spawn, I got to the point where the spawn was now adults, and I went ahead and I chose the most promising males and females out of the spawn to photograph. I like to take pictures of fish and really get in there and analyze which is the best one. Because, you know, a still image, high-res image of a fish is a lot easier to work off of than just by looking at a fish moving around really fast. At least, that's how I like it. I like taking the easy route. The lazy way. I want to start by saying that in this batch of fish, I'm not choosing based on colors. The reason for this is because I spawned a really heavy dragon layer male to this solid black female. The first generation offspring, you know, they're obviously going to be black, but they're not going to have the full dragon coverage that I'm looking for. They're going to be partial dragons. So I know that if I just pair two fish from this spawn together, the next generation is going to have a lot more full dragon coverage. So that's why when choosing out of all these fish, I'm not looking at I'm not focusing on their color or how, you know, the blue iridescence looks on them or the ones with the fullest coverage. I'm not really worried about that. I'm mostly just looking at the form of the fish. I'm selecting for form. I feel like doing that will make my next batch of fish even better. So here are the image compilations that I made showing my males and my females that I showed in my last video, all side by side because it's easier to get a good feel for everyone that way and to be able to compare them that much easier. So let's start by analyzing my male fish. Here is kind of a nicer compilation of all my males. I have male A, B, and C, all brothers from the same spawn. This is my thought process on how I analyzed them. The very first thing I like to look at in a betta fish is the body. I'm looking for size and strength, and specifically, I'm looking at the top line. The top line is the curve or the slope of the top of the fish, of the back, kind of like this. I'm looking for a nice smooth curve on the top of these fish. Here's an example. I'm going to draw a line on the top of this fish, kind of following the curve of the back, and you can see it's really nice and smooth and pleasant. If I were to exaggerate the curve, you would see that the nose of this fish has this little swoop to it, this little fighter snout, it's called sometimes. This is a betta who I'd say has a nice top line, and I think he's really cute. Now let's look at male C's top line. Male C has a really nice smooth curve, and I think it looks great, so he gets a check mark too. Male A, in my opinion, isn't quite as gifted in the top line department. If you look carefully, he doesn't have a nice curve. Instead, there's a little bump in it. It's kind of hard to see, so let me exaggerate it. You can see that the nice curve is definitely interrupted by that little tiny amount of almost a hunch bump. Hunch bump. I should really memorize the official terms for these things. But because of that, male A does not get a check mark. Now I think it'd be fun to take a look at maybe some fish with top lines that I don't really find all that pleasing. Sometimes it's good to give examples where you show fish that maybe aren't, you know, such good examples. Let's start with this long fin female here. I wouldn't consider this fish to have a very strong top line. It's very long and shallow. This is quite a long-bodied fish, which is fine depending on what you need for your line to improve it. But this is an example of a very shallow curve. Here's an example of a female with practically no curve. This female is really flat-backed, which I also don't find very pleasing. So this image looks kind of weird because I had to blur out a watermark. I felt kind of weird critiquing someone's fish when it had their name on it. I didn't want to do that. I'd much rather just blur out their name and critique the fish. I just wanted this as an example of a fish that had a pretty severe hunchback. I call them hunchbacks. Again, I forget the proper term. The next thing that I'll take a look at are the fins. I'll start with the ventral fins, which are the long, pointy ones at the front of the fish, right here. I can already tell that in my eyes, male C is the winner here. His ventral fins are long and pointed and sharp looking and dramatic, and I like that. Some people might say they're a little proportionately too long, but I really prefer that look to the stubby ventral fins of the other two fish. So a point for male C. Here's an example of what I mean by long, pointed ventral fins seeming more dramatic. Look at these two fish. The white fish I just feel like it's so much more striking because of those long, pointed ventral fins than the red fish, who, it's a pretty fish. Absolutely, it's a beautiful little fish, but it doesn't have that same sense of, I don't know what to call it, elegance maybe? Sharpness? Even if the ventral fins are a little proportionately too long, I still prefer them. Here's another trait that I like to select against. If you look at the ventral fins on these fish, you'll notice that they don't just come to a single point. They come to multiple points. The point is split. I definitely prefer a single point. It looks a lot cleaner in my opinion. I don't consider it that big of a deal, but I do select against it if I can. Okay, moving on. The next fin I'll look at is the caudal fin. The caudal fin, which is the back fin of the fish, this is pretty much the fin that defines the betta fish. So these fish are half-moon placats, which means that they're short-finned bettas, but the short-finned fish have been selectively bred to have a fuller, wider spread of their caudal fin. Here's an example of a traditional placat. As you can see, it doesn't have as much ray branching as the half-moon placats, which means the spread of its tail is not nearly as wide. For a half-moon placat, I'm looking for a caudal fin which is really D-shaped. It's really full and sharp and pointy at the edges, and it looks like a capital D. Male A and C definitely have the advantage here when it comes to their caudal fins, but I actually like male C a little bit more. It's because male C's edges of the caudal fin are less rounded than male A's. Which lends itself more to a capital D shape. I'll show a few examples of male fish with a really strong, sharp, capital D-shaped caudal fin. Some of these fish are show fish that I pulled off of some websites like the Bettas for All website. So another point goes to male C. The next fin I'll look at is the anal fin. Down at the bottom of the fish, this big, long, kind of trapezoid-shaped fin down here. So for this one, I look for a few things. I don't want it to be too long and trailing, but I also don't want it to be too short. I want the fin to make as straight of a line as possible in this direction, and I also want it to come to a point and not rounded. So looking at all these fish, male B and C would be the winners here, and male A, he has a really rounded end of his anal fin, and I don't like that. Here are a few images of fish that I think are really nice examples for a good anal fin. Male C gets another check mark. It's pretty obvious that male C is my winner. I think I've gone over how I chose in a whole lot of detail and why I chose him, and I hope it made sense to everyone. Now it's time to move over to the females. I'll be taking a lot of concepts that I use for the males over to the females as well. Since I have more fish to choose from, I'll be able to disqualify some a little more quickly. Just like with the males, I look first at the body shape and the top line. There's one extra thing I need to explain for what I prefer in the female body shape. I prefer them to look kind of like teardrops versus ovals. It's kind of hard to explain. Here's a little picture of what I mean. I say that because I think that a more streamlined body looks very elegant and very striking versus a more stout kind of oval-shaped body that females can definitely have. Sometimes females can get really, really stout and eggy. I'm going to disqualify female C because of that reason. She has the most stout oval-shaped body. In the photo, her caudal looks a little bit weird, but it's just her pose. She's kind of pushing her tail over to the side, flaring at another fish, so I'm not really paying attention to that. Sometimes a fish's pose can definitely have an impact on how they look in a photo. I'm also going to disqualify female B. Her top line seems the most shallow of the remaining fish, and I'm also noticing her proportions and her body length. She's just slightly longer bodied than I would like. Okay, I've whittled my selection down to 3 remaining females now. Next, I'll look at the caudal fin. Female A and E clearly have the fuller caudal fin with a nicer D shape. It might seem like female E doesn't, but I just snapped that photo when she wasn't in a perfect flare. Female D's caudal fin is smaller, so she's disqualified. She has the darkest coloration, which is kind of nice, but earlier I did say that I'm specifically not looking at color. Now to choose between female A and E, my last 2 fish. And I don't know, these fish, they look exactly alike to me. They're like twins. I could have 2 fish, side by side in a tank, and I wouldn't know the difference. They look the exact same to me. Now, E doesn't have as full of a flare in the photo, but it's just the pose. I feel like it's a toss-up between these 2 fish, because they're pretty much the exact same, at least in my eyes. So I chose female A. Female E is really nice too, so I've kept her, and I've decided to pair her to another fish of mine. Thanks to everyone who participated in the last video. It was fun to hear what people's thoughts were, and answers were kind of all over the place, though male B and C were usually the favorites. And as for females, those were kind of all over the place too. I was going to make like a tally, but there ended up being so many answers, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the time. So thanks so much for participating in the last video. So these are my winner fish, these 2 right here. Female E was also one of my favorite females. So I'm gonna go ahead and pair her to a different male that I have, who's like this nice marble. She is going to improve that male, if that makes sense. I already spawned them a few weeks ago, but my spawn is very small, so I'll probably try again soon. I'm looking forward to some offspring with really great form, and hopefully a nice heavier dragon layer too, because that's really pretty. So I hope you guys enjoyed having a look into my decision-making process. If you would have done things differently, you can always comment in the comments down below and let me know. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm gonna have some more Betta stuff coming up in the future. Thanks so much to my patrons. I love you guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you later.